Hey guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. Welcome to another episode of the Rad Season Show. I'm super stoked to be joined today by the Group Y CEO and co-founder, a super connector within the action sports community and world, Mark Sperling. Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
How's everything going? Whereabouts are you at the moment?
Everything's great. I'm here in beautiful Laguna Beach, right over here, a couple blocks from the ocean. So it's like mini paradise here. It's our little oasis.
Nice. And what's the what's the situation like? Is it kind of being things? I guess everything's sort of started to open up now, right? I mean, you can get out and
definitely. I mean, everyone's kind of getting their vaccines now. Life is kind of coming back to normal. All the restaurants are open, almost at full capacity. We're starting to see live events starting to happen, and I think Disneyland's opening up here any day now. So
You're kidding.
I think we're getting close, very close.
Nice, good stuff. Well, I'd love to, I guess, jump straight into it if you don't mind, and kind of go back to the beginning, because you grew up in Southern California, is that right?
Yeah, correct. I actually I was born in Hawaii, and then my family moved to San Diego when I was still a baby. So kind of still have those little Hawaiian roots in me.
Nice. I mean, and like with that whole beach culture, I mean, it wasn't then like too much of a change, right? I mean, like, going from Hawaii to then moving over to San Diego.
No, yeah, it was incredible there because I mean, where we lived, we were almost like 15 minutes from everything. So whether it was the beach, your favorite surf spots, to the mountains, everything was really close by, and the lifestyle there was really about being active.
Yeah.
And I think the best part about them was that's when skate parks were coming. We had Del Mar right up the road. I had my skate oasis. I had my first spots. I was definitely very active in running, and triathlons were kind of starting to become the thing at that time. We can go off to the mountains and go camping, or run up to the mountains and go also skiing at that time.
Wow. And was this when you were in high school? Would you kind of be like, was that sort of when you got into skating and then started doing triathlons? Was that all through school, or?
No, actually, it was actually when I was much younger, actually. I came from a very active family, so we were into running and cycling when I was very young. And we would camp at the beach all the time. So I really got into skateboarding and surfing probably when I was in my young teens. And then it just kind of, the passion kind of grew from there.
And there wasn't any, when you started doing that, were you then still doing track and still doing triathlons? Were you kind of combining it all?
Yeah, definitely. So I was on the cross country team doing track. I would run half marathons, do biathlons and triathlons on the weekend. So definitely was a very busy schedule while training during the morning and the afternoon, and then run off to the beach and do all these other activities. So it was definitely a fun-filled time.
And like where like with that location, it's got that opportunity of kind of going into the hills, going for a run. You can go trail running, and then you can hit up the skate park.
Yes.
In the morning as well, and then go for a surf. So yeah, it's kind of one of those amazing spots, right, where you can do all that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of joke around. We would do the kind of like the triathlon, our version, the different version of the triathlon, where you wake up, you could either run to the mountains, go ski, or snowboarding eventually, come back, hit one of the skate parks, and then go for surf at the end of the day, or vice versa, start off with the dawn patrol type thing. And so it was incredible. It was just the perfect location to be.
And was there like a crew of you doing that then, or were you kind of doing it with family or on your own?
Yeah, a little bit with the family. We definitely would run up to like Mammoth, go skiing at that time. And then eventually when I got to high school, I was active in our ski club that eventually would become a snowboard club. And then, both my parents were very active in the community, and then they would go running or cycling. So it was definitely a family affair for sure.
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of friends and neighbors that were into surfing and skateboarding. So they would take me to all these different places. And I think the best part about San Diego during that time is we had an incredible amount of people that were like the top athletes in each of these different sports living there. So whether it was like a Tony Hawk to anywhere from like the top runners and triathletes and outdoors people living in that area because it was just the perfect location to do all that.
Do you reckon that was almost like the breeding ground of like having that opportunity and then having those people who were then like pushing each other, right?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely, for sure. So, whether it was doing a race on the weekend, here you are competing against some of the best in the nation that just happen to be living in San Diego, to, going to the skate park, and there's all the guys that you looked at a magazine where they're skating. So it was definitely an interesting time, and it was a lot of progression going on. It was, the early stages of all these kind of subcultures growing.
Yeah, and then with the music sort of scene, like how was that? Were you kind of involved with that back then? I mean, were you kind of going, sort of linking it in with skating and surfing?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in a home that was definitely diverse in the music that we would listen to. Especially also at school, we had a really kind of mixed group of people that went to our schools. Hear all these different types of genres, whether it was 80s new wave to punk to hip hop and rap. Living also kind of on the border, we would have to listen to country music too in San Diego on the eastern side there. So it was really kind of a great mix. Also world music, hearing a lot of that from different countries. And so San Diego was kind of this one place where it was kind of like, we weren't LA, but still people and bands and concerts would still come there. So at a very early age, I went to my very first concert, which happened to be like a 50,000 person event with Def Leppard as the headliner and this opening band that nobody had ever heard of called Motley Crue. And so
That's awesome.
So seeing that, and then back in the day, there was this thing called the US Festival that one of the founders of Apple created, and it was like the most iconic festival of all time. And it was one of those things, when I saw those two, I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a part of this. I want to create this kind of experience. And so I was hooked then and just kind of went to all these different concerts. I love the live experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of similar. Like I grew up in London, and I think when I was like 14 and sort of like started going to gigs, it was almost like, okay, like who's going to be playing next? When can I go? And it was almost like, you're just counting down to the weekend so you can kind of go and watch the music again. And yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And then what did you do? So were you then involved, like, because when you went to university, I've heard that you were almost like starting to promote events then, right? So you went to the University of California, Irvine. Were you doing anything before that? Like, were you kind of sort of trying to get like behind the scenes already, like when you were in high school, or like what happened?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, I got to give credit to my parents, because they're definitely one of those type of people that they're like the event planners. They're the party planners of the community. They're active and volunteering. And so they really kind of put that bug in me. So in high school, actually, I was really active in a lot of different clubs in addition to some of the sports I was involved in. And I would then produce events for the student body to kind of get us all together. So we had this thing called Alternative Day, where it was kind of like showcasing all these different alternative activities to do instead of, maybe taking drugs or drinking alcohol. And it ended up being this huge event that went on for decades at the high school. And so I started realizing I really had this passion for organizing stuff, and I liked being behind the scenes and kind of coming up with new ideas and seeing how people would react to it, and their, how they would be entrenched in it, and then also creating a memory for them that they would live on, that they would keep talking about. So that was probably some of my earlier starts of it. And then when I got to college, it was full on. I was producing parties, events. I got very active in different clubs. I ended up being like vice president of the ski and snowboard club. That was like the biggest club at the university. And then active, I was part of a fraternity, and I was the social chair. I would set up the parties, and then I would leave to go hang out with my other friends, and then come back at the end, seeing everybody all drunk and having a good old time. And then eventually in college, I would get involved with the student government and start producing festivals and concerts. And that was an incredible time then.
And was that when you then got in, like, you were then sort of partnering with Goldenvoice, producing those concerts? And what, like, who were some of the, like, who were the bands back then?
It was incredible, because it was really interesting, because we would produce our own shows at a pub there on campus. And so we kind of had our house bands, and it would vary from back in the very, very early days of like No Doubt. Here's Gwen Stefani at 18 years old singing with her brother and the other guys. Social Distortion was definitely one of them. We had this band called Mighty Joe Young, who played their last concert under that name, and then 2 weeks later they came back as a new band called Stone Temple Pilots. Sublime was starting around that time, so Sublime would play at the pub and play at our house. So having I have photos of videos of Bradley singing in our house for a party that we held. There was another band called the Shrinky Dinks who kind of came from our school and hung out in Newport and all that, and they ended up being Sugar Ray. So Mark McGrath and those guys. So it was really interesting to see that. And then Goldenvoice would come in and produce these bigger concerts. So we would have anywhere from like Love and Rockets played one time, and then this opening band called Jane's Addiction that nobody had ever heard of really, except if you were in the LA scene. And that was right there. I was like my aha, like, wow, I got to work. I got to do something with this guy later on, this Perry Farrell, Pharrell, and Jane's Addiction. We had the MTV 120 Minutes tour come through where it was like Big Audio Dynamite, PIL, Blind Melon. Who else we've had? I mean, it was like a who's who that came through there. And a credit to Paul Tillett and everybody over at Goldenvoice for really kind of like bringing music to Orange County in Irvine. We were kind of like this little section up below LA that nobody really would think of much about, but he brought some incredible talent down there throughout the years.
And were there like many venues? I mean, was it sort of like the Cuckoo's Nest, or was there any other kind of places? I was watching this documentary actually that kind of popped up like the other day, and I was like, it was just all about that. And I was like, man, it would have been a good time.
I know. I kind of missed the whole Cuckoo's Nest thing. I mean, we had our own kind of punk scene down in San Diego. This Tim Mays would run it down there, but the Cuckoo's Nest was funny because we used to actually eat next door at Zuby's where they had the famous fight, the Cowboys versus punker fight, and it turned into a pizza joint. So that's where we would go eat like every Tuesday night and get beers and stuff. The venues were kind of really weird. In Orange County, we didn't have that many. We had the Irvine Meadows, which was like the big amphitheater. We had a couple of little small clubs, I think like the Doll Hut and a couple, Fenders up in Long Beach. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times I had to go drive up to LA and go to the Palladium, the Palace, Roxy, Whiskey, Troubadour. There was all these kind of iconic clubs up there that they were having the best shows. And I would just go drive up there at night, whether my friends would go with me or I'd be there by myself. And it was always funny to be there and just seeing the scene kind of grow and seeing these bands that I had listened to so often on the radio, finally getting to see them live in person.
That's awesome. And like, so when you're being involved then for the student union and kind of putting all these events on and helping out, when you then left university, what did you do? Did you like think, okay, right, I've got to get into this somehow and kind of make this my job? And like, what happened?
Yeah. So I had the decision to either go abroad and study in Kyoto, Japan, or go work for a marketing agency that worked with all the different record labels. And it was a really tough decision because I definitely the Japanese culture was something I was really kind of enamored by, and I just really kind of studied so much about. But I decided to go the record label route, and it was fun. I got to work with Interscope Records, Hollywood Records, work with all these different bands. We did a lot of promotion via the college radio, and it was interesting because this was kind of like almost the beginning of the internet, the precursor of it all. So we were using chat rooms to kind of talk to people, to get them involved. Like, hey, check out this band, listen to this. And it was interesting, and that kind of led to also at that time working for MTV. We got a call, and somebody said, "Hey, can you we're looking for somebody to help us with the production side of the summer version of MTV, where they would film at all the different beaches, and they would have celebrities come in and pop in and do cameo things." So I did that for a while, and it was really interesting. It was I think I learned about TV production really quick at that time.
And what kind of things were you doing for the production? Were they putting on then different shows or?
Yeah, so we were kind of like a remote film crew, and we would film at a beach. And I think you posted up a photo, and I have it here. I love this one. One of the very first interviews we did was with let's see if you can get there. we'll have to post up later, is with Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff. And this was at the summer of right when they were starting to become big. I think the show had just, Fresh Prince was just on TV, and their song "Summertime" was just hitting the radios. So here we are, spending a couple of days on the beach, just hanging out. And, I was kind of like doing the runner. I had to make sure cameras were set up. And then it was pretty funny. They would be like, "Hey, Mark, do you want to jump in and do this kind of like bit with Will Smith and all them?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So there's a video floating around of me getting beat up by this big Samoan security guard while Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff are laughing at me. So it was pretty funny.
I've got to get my hands on that video.
Yeah, no. Hope it's not on YouTube. That's all I know.
And that was so that was early 90s, right? That was around like sort of 92, like when the show was kind of kicking off. And
yeah, definitely 92. Yeah. So it was really interesting because MTV really didn't have like a West Coast presence. So we were kind of like the first of MTV. And then eventually they would launch Beach House, which I think started like a year or two later, and that became like their big summer programming.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then after that, you then jumped into like action sports media, right? And was that when sort of when the Transworld journey began?
Yeah, around that same time, I also was working with a clothing label with a number of different artists from the surf industry, and it was called Earth Crisis. And it was basically a clothing line that would launch, and we would talk about different social issues, environmental issues. So we were doing all these events and such, and I saw an ad for an event called Boarded that Transworld Media was putting on. So I kind of reached out to them and said, "Hey, can we participate in this event? We really want to be involved in it." So they said, "Yeah, why don't you also help us out and produce this event?" So Izzy, who is the founder of Surf Diva, was putting on the event at the time, and another guy named Fran Richards. And they said, "Yeah, come on board." And so I kind of became this intern with them. And we put on the very first event, and it was just this kind of casual get together up at the local mountains, I think at Snow Summit, and the Beastie Boys were there. And you can go snowboard with the Beastie Boys. There were some pros there. We had some bands playing, and it was a benefit, kind of like an educational event about HIV and AIDS to get younger people to understand it. And we worked with an organization called Lightbeat. So after that event happened, it was really cool. It was great that they offered me a job to come on board and work with Louise Bama, whose husband Larry Bama founded Transworld, and create this events and marketing department. So Louise and I just basically said, "Okay, let's do it." And Transworld at that time was incredible. It was one of those things where skateboarding was kind of re-emerging again after it kind of had a bit of a bump, and snowboarding was just massively growing. It was like growing leaps and bounds, and it was gaining acceptance. And so our job at that time was to basically take these sports and kind of bring them to the mainstream and try to really showcase the good parts of it and create events where we can kind of bring that to light and really elevate the competition side of things, the experience side of things, and also, grow the magazine as a whole.
And was that when X Games kind of like the concept was there for X Games, and sort of when it started?
Yeah, so we actually got approached by some of the guys from ESPN and saying, "Hey, we want to bring this idea." They actually had come to some of the events that we had created, whether it was Board Aid, or at that time we also created the World Championships of Skateboarding with Hard Rock Cafe and bands. And so they had come to those events and kind of saw it and said, "Hey, we want to bring all these different sports together and really elevate it and bring it onto a TV platform like ESPN." And I remember some of the first meetings, some of the sports they were talking about, I think it was like snow shovel racing. And then I don't know if it was the skydiving, surfing was involved in that one. And we just all looked at each other and went, "What the, like, is this for real?" Like, we kind of almost felt like we were a sideshow at this event. It was really kind of hokey at first. And so we kind of, they wanted us to kind of be a partner of it and really bring our media and stuff like that. And I remember the first one was in, was it Providence, Rhode Island? Somewhere back east. And none of us went. I think maybe a couple of people in the media went. And we were watching it on TV and seeing the colorful courses and all that. And it was just kind of like, wow, okay, I don't know about this. And then I remember we went to the very first ESPN, or to the first X Games up at Snow Summit, the snow version of it. And again, it was just kind of interesting, again, watching the snow shovel racing happening and some of these other things. I think at that time, then ESPN kind of came back to us and started talking to us, going, "Hey, okay, we need to fix this. What would you guys suggest?" And we definitely gave them our input from it.
Yeah. And like, did they reach out to you beforehand for help, or were they like, this is what we're going to do? And, this is kind of.
Yeah, it was kind of like they were trying to talk to everybody within Transworld to kind of either get us on board. And I think some of us were just not wanting to be part of it. We wanted to kind of focus on our own things. And it was just one of those things where eventually I think they learned after they did the first couple of ones, like, okay, we now need to talk to the athletes. We need to talk to the community to really improve on it. And they did over the years. And it's a testament to the X Games crew that have kind of made it last for so long and kept it relevant throughout those years. And the progression.
And when did Warped Tour begin? I mean, that was kind of that was then as well, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So it was really interesting. So when we were putting on Board Aid, we reached out to this guy named Kevin Lyman, who you interviewed. Kevin at the time had been the production guy for Lollapalooza tour. He also worked for Goldenvoice, kind of running all the production aspects of things. So I had seen him behind the scenes. I saw this guy with this crazy kind of hat, looked like, jungle man, running around, putting on all these unique concerts. And he would always find crazy venues. Like I remember going to see Jane's Addiction up at Mount Baldy, up in the middle of this place, and going to other venues. I think we went to ski resorts where they would have festivals and such. So we knew Kevin was the guy we needed to have. And so Kevin kind of came on board for the second Board Aid, which we turned it into a massive festival. Like I basically looked at Lollapalooza and said, hey, can we bring Lollapalooza on snow? Okay, let's get Kevin, because Kevin used to run Lollapalooza. And so Louise and I basically, with an incredible team, put together this event where it was like, we had snowboarding, 50 of the best snowboarders in the world. We had a skate ramp, vert ramp on the snow with 25 of the best vert skaters. And then we would have this concert stage with Porno for Pyros, which was basically Jane's Addiction, and a number of other bands. And then we would have MTV and all these celebrities there. And so we did it that second year, and it was a massive hit. It had 10,000 plus people up on the snow. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then from that, Kevin was sitting back going, how do we take this on? Like, this is amazing. I think somebody, Otis, who's a famous photographer, skate photographer, also said the same thing to Kevin. And so from there, Kevin kind of came back and was kind of creating this concept of taking Board Aid on the road. And it would kind of have that music and action sports lifestyle culture mixed together. And, we worked with Kevin a little bit on it. I remember the very first meeting going to CAA. It was like Kevin, myself, Fran Richards, and a couple of CAA agents. And I was just sitting there like the kid in the room going, oh my God, how the hell did I get here? And listening to this concept. And it was going to be called the Bomb Tour, which I think Kevin probably explained to you.
Yeah.
And, we had the logos, everything was all ready to go. And then the week we were going to announce tickets, the Oklahoma City bombing happened. And thankfully, Fran Richards at that time, who kind of was he was one of the publishers of the magazine group and ran sales. He really wanted to promote our magazine Warp. And he, pitched it to Kevin saying, hey, let's call this Warp Tour. And I remember Fran asking me about it. And I was like, God, that's a terrible idea. It's like, why are you promoting us? Like, this is terrible. I'm glad he never listened to me. So, eventually Kevin liked the idea, everything worked out. And in that first year, Kevin went out on the road. And I think he's probably told you and numerous others in, interviews about the craziness of that first year.
Yeah.
How it went. And, again, it's incredible to think how that tour has lasted for so many years and how it's changed so many people's lives in so many different ways.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then it almost went then full circle, because you then went back and was that when you were then working with Lollapalooza? Like what was the sort of the transition sort of after Transworld? What did you do?
So after 4 years of working at Transworld, again, that was kind of like my MBA working there. I met so many different people from so many industries. We worked with a lot of different record labels. Sports were growing. We were working with corporate America. And so, I got to work with people like Grant Britton, all the skate team, the snow photographers, these, iconic individuals and athletes. And so afterwards I was sitting there going, okay, I feel like I've done everything I can. we've done the trip around skateboarding. We've created all these iconic things. And so I got offered 2 jobs. One was to go work for MTV again and be a producer on this new thing called the Sports and Music Festival, or to go out on Lollapalooza and be in charge of like their social issues that they had. So like Perry Farrell, who was the founder of the tour, would always come up with a theme every year. And so I decided, I'm like, you know what? I got to do this. Lollapalooza was the kind of like the linchpin, the thing that kind of launched what I wanted to do. And so I went out on tour with them, and it was the craziest, scariest thing I've ever gone through. I was in charge of like 1,000 nonprofits to make sure that they were there on site. I also then was in charge of taking Perry's crazy ideas and bringing them to life, and how we kind of educate the audience on all these different issues that are happening in the world. And then getting to work with all the different bands that are on the tour. And it was incredible because at that time, that was the first year that electronica music was on any festival tour. So we had Prodigy, Orb, and Orbital. You had Korn, you had Snoop Dogg. It was just this crazy eclectic mix of all these different egos and talent and stuff like that. And it was fun times. It was truly incredible. And I still to this day, everybody from that tour are some of my closest friends. And I got to see America, the real America, while going on this tour.
How long did it go on for when you were doing the tour? So like, were they kind of, was it touring all over the US or?
Yeah, so it's all over the US and Canada. So we start like 2 or 3 months beforehand, and then we would go up on for the entire summer. And so it was very interesting, because coming from the Warped Tour, what was like, let's pack as many people on a bus, let's go, 10 days straight without really taking a shower. It was a very communal type thing.
Yeah.
And then I go out on Lollapalooza, and it's like 5-star hotels we're staying at. We would do maybe 1 or 2 shows, and we would take a break for a day. First class buses. It was just like, wow, okay, this is the true rock star lifestyle. This is it, the pinnacle of it all. And so it was incredible. It was a lot of work. I mean, people think that going out on the road is really kind of fun, but you're up at 5 a.m. and you're going all the way till midnight, and then you're exhausted. You pass out in your bus bunk, which is like a little coffin, as we call it. And then boom, you're driving all night, and you wake up in a new city, and it start all over again.
And what like was that then sort of like after you did that year, did you just think, okay, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to kind of still be involved in like the live event type of thing and the entertainment side of things. I still had this passion for action sports. And so I was trying to figure out a way how to kind of mix the 2 worlds together. So when I came back from Lollapalooza, I was very fortunate. I got a job offer to work for the Hard Rock Cafes. This guy, Jeff Wagner, who we worked with on producing the World Championships of Skateboarding in the Triple Crown series, he's like, hey, why don't you come on board and be one of our marketing people? And you're in charge of now, I think I had like 7 or 8 cafes that I was in charge of all their marketing, their PR, and special events. And so it varied everywhere from like all the cafes in Hawaii to San Diego, Arizona, and then also Las Vegas at the time, the one next door to the hotel. So again, I was kind of back in the entertainment world with the hospitality twist to it. And the best part about the Hard Rock Cafe is we were involved in so many different things, whether it was arts, sports, entertainment. I mean, you name it, we did it, kind of a thing. So I was constantly on the go, and it was fun. It was definitely, again, that was kind of like my second MBA.
Were you traveling with everything as well? Were you kind of like on the ground during those promotional events? Okay.
Yeah. So basically almost every other day I was flying to one of the new cafes, or to any of the cafes I was in charge of. And we constantly had events going 24/7 there, it seemed like. And so it was really fun, unique. Again, I got to meet so many different people from so many different industries. Really understanding how to run a big business like that was incredible. So definitely it was an incredible opportunity for sure.
And then it was back into the action sports world.
Yes. So yeah, I think I joked.
There's so many jobs we could talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. I finally made a list one day, and I think I had 100 jobs. So I've definitely bounced around. But the positive of it all is I've met so many incredible people and I've learned so many new skills from it all. So
Yeah.
it's been interesting. So yeah, so after Hard Rock, a couple of my friends were the founders of this clothing company called Split. And then at that time, Split was kind of like the early streetwear brands that met skate and surf. And so they were kind of constantly, growth wise, they were one of those ones where they were just sitting there going, okay, we are not a surf brand. We're not a skate brand. At that time, all the kind of clothing companies had like a specific label, or they were kind of in a specific genre. They were kind of a little bit everywhere, music, all the different sports. So I came on board to oversee their marketing for them. And I inherited a team of 200 athletes or something ridiculous like that. The guy before me, Gus Buckner, had like put everybody on the flow program. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And as I dived in deeper, I realized that he had this kind of stable of incredible athletes. I mean, he had people like Dave Mira, who at the time was the best in BMX. Andy McDonald, who was, one of the best skateboarders. Carey Hart, who at this time freestyle motocross was starting to kind of take off. And we had the top wakeboarders, we kind of had like the best of the number one athletes in all these different kind of sports. And I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, okay, like that right there, I'm like, we need to make this brand a multi-sport lifestyle brand. Yeah. And, at that time, the only other company that was doing it, I think, was Arnett Sunglasses. They were the only ones that were kind of involved in motocross and BMX, skate, surf, snow, wakeboarding. And so I decided to kind of have us focus on that in addition to music, and really kind of narrow down the team and really focus on those top guys. And it was incredible. I mean, I remember going to the first X Games. There was one in San Diego that we went to, and almost every one of our athletes won gold medal. And then I'm just like, wow. And then we went to San Francisco the next year, and same exact scenario. And we all of a sudden were this little brand, and we started focusing on like, hey, let's focus on let's be the best in BMX. Let's be the best in wakeboarding. Let's be the best in, let's not try to go in sports, surf and skate, where there was so many competitors. Let's just try to be the best in everything, but still have presence and all that. And we did an incredible job in a short amount of time with limited funds.
Were you guys cutting down sports? Were you like, okay, like after that, inheriting 500 athletes, you're just sort of looking at it and going, okay, if we scale it back, make it a bit more manageable.
Yeah, we definitely scaled it back. So we really focused on the top tier athletes, and then we kind of had our secondary athletes, and then brought on others. So like, at that time, freestyle motocross was just starting to kind of become something.
Yeah.
We helped get them on the Warped Tour for the very first time, and kind of elevated, that really brought freestyle motocross to the masses, to America. And at that time, progression was just kind of every week those guys were learning a new trick. So when we launched it, we had Carey Hart, and then we built a team around him. So we got Ronnie Feist, Mike Metzger, who was like number one at that time, and a guy named Mickey Diamond, who was kind of like a legend in the motocross world. And we built a motocross team around that. And then we did the same thing in BMX. We had Dave Mira, and then Dave's like, hey, you got to bring on Ryan Nyquist. And then we had a guy named Dave Smith. And, at a time we did Jamie Bestwick was on our team. And so we kind of had, Joe Rich was on the team. So these are kind of names that people were in these sports, they would know who they are. Wakeboarding, we did the same thing. We had a guy named Randall Harris, the Vandal, who was kind of like the rebel. And then we had Emily Copeland, who was the number one wakeboarder. Skateboarding, same thing. We had Andy McDonald, Neil Hendricks, Fabrizio Santos, Danny Gonzalez. So it was really kind of cool to be in each of these sports. Like, you almost had to become an instant expert in all these sports to really learn it. And it was incredible. It was just like a really unique time to see, one, the progression in each of these sports, but also the realizing that, I was told for so long, you cannot have a multi-sport brand. You have to be either skate specific or surf specific, or, one of these things. And I think we proved everyone wrong that you can be. And then it was funny to see shortly after Hurley and, Quicksilver and all these other companies basically taking our exact same model and, duplicating it and doing it. And then in some cases stealing our athletes or taking the athletes away from us. So it was definitely really unique and really cool to see that going. And the growth of that brand went through the roof. The founders of Split went on to create Circa and Crew. And so they did an incredible job about that. So kudos to those guys.
Nice. And what did you do after that? Like,
what did I do after that? There a couple of different things. So, I think afterwards I wanted to kind of go back out on my own. One of the things I did was at Split, we launched a women's line, and I wanted to do something that kind of was in the same vein of what we were doing on the men's side. So I had created a program called Girls Learn to Ride, where we would teach girls and women of all ages how to start and participate in surf, skate, snow, wake, motocross, BMX, and mountain biking. And we would hold these clinics throughout the United States, and it was women specific. We would have female instructors. We would provide all the gear for them. So we would take away all the pain points. We would hear all these horrible stories about how some of the women and girls would have their boyfriends try to teach them these sports, and it was like the worst experience ever. So we wanted to remove all those kind of challenges. And, we did our very first one up at Mountain High, a snowboarding one, and we had, I think, like 160, 170 girls and women of all ages show up from all different backgrounds. And I think right then and there, we were like, okay, we've got something here. There's something unique. So I launched that whole program, and we started holding tons of clinics throughout the United States and all these things, sports. And we probably taught over tens of thousands of women and girls of all ages, again from all different genre backgrounds and communities. And it was really cool to see that. We got a lot of opposition from the industry. A lot of people said there's girls don't want to learn this. There's no
really?
There's no market for this, including some of the female specific brands that were in surfing and these sports. They were the ones that were against it. So, it's great to see now how women's participation has exploded in all these sports, and it being part of the Olympics and such. So it's a incredible thing. So that was one thing while I was doing that afterwards. The other thing too was doing PR. We worked with Target to launch like their action sports side of things. So working with Shaun White, we did a lot of things at the X Games. We brought the X Games vert ramp to Encinitas Skate Park. So that was really cool to kind of do that. And then also around that same time, this idea that we had talked about a while ago, my friend Carl Harris and I, about how do we bring all those kind of sports together and bring it to like a concert tour type thing. So I remember Carl reached out to me and said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this. I talked to Tony." And I'm like, "Tony?" And he's like, "Yeah, Tony Hawk. He wants to do the idea we were joking around about for so many years, and he wants to call it the Boom Boom Huck Jam Tour." And he's like, "I want you to be a part of it." So I came on board, and it was like this ragtag team. Tony had brought on the best of the best, a number of these different athletes in skateboarding, BMX, and motocross, some of which were athletes that I had on Split. And so we kind of put together this first event in Las Vegas. We had, I think, Social Distortion played at it, and then a couple of maybe Good Charlotte or one of the other bands. And we sold out this major arena. And it was Tony had built this $1 million skate ramp that you could put the whole thing together with like an Allen wrench. And it was incredible. It was like, we brought in the best lighting, the best sound. It was like a real concert meets the X Games. And from there, we kind of knew like, all right, we got to take this out on the road. So the following year, we did, I think, like 25, 26 cities, of which a majority of them sold out. We're talking about venues that were 16 to 20,000 person. We would bring on bands like, again, Social Distortion, Devo, Good Charlotte, I forgot who else. Oh, CKY and others. And it was just, it was incredible because these athletes, for the very first time, were treated like rock stars. We had tour buses, we were flying jets. We had a full green room. We had celebrities coming to hang out with us. And so, my job was to run the marketing and the sponsorship and partnership side of things. And again, it was kind of like being back on the road, like a Lollapalooza tour, where you get there early in the morning, you're working all night long, and then boom, you pass out and you wake up in another city. But it was incredible. I think the reaction that we saw from people, it was one of those things, credit to Tony and the whole team that were involved to making that happen. It was definitely one of those things where I think it elevated our lifestyle and our sports and brought it to a whole new light and brought it to a whole new audience too.
And like now looking back, when you were doing, like when you were on tour and like doing these events, was that something that you thought, okay, like, you know, like, was it, obviously it's tiring doing doing that and going to all these locations.
Yes.
Were you like, okay, like maybe, you know, I should step back and we kind of, you know, almost be back, like sort of be in one location and sort of run something from there? Or were you thinking, okay, like it was the experience, it was the excitement from it that you kind of just wanted to keep on doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. You definitely are running on adrenaline, sure, about 90% of the time, but it does get tiring and it's taxing on you and your body just starts to break down. And so I started realizing that, okay, all these different things that I'm learning, I want to take back and maybe create my own events again or work with somebody. You know, I think my ultimate goal was always to be, there was a guy named Bill Graham who was a famous concert promoter back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I always wanted to kind of be him. And I'm like, I want to put on the world's biggest event, or I want to put on something that people are going to remember for ages to come. And so that's always kind of been in the back of my head. And so from that point forward, I always kind of gravitated towards working on projects or events or initiatives that would make that kind of change in one capacity. So, you know, I've been very fortunate to work on stuff that where it was the very first time it was ever introduced, and then seeing the longevity, you know, it actually resonated with the audience and then kind of kept it going for years and years to come. You know, where I was very fortunate also around that same time to work with Primedia that had Surfer and Snowboarder and Skateboarder and Bike magazine, and seeing that world again and kind of producing events for them. So it was really cool. It was definitely things. And I think if anything, that was kind of like a chapter in my life that kind of prepared me for the next chapter going forward.
So. And do you reckon, I mean, was the passion, was it around youth, like culture and marketing? It was always that, like at its core, that was kind of, that was the main thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, regardless of how old I was at the time, youth culture and marketing was always kind of something in me. I was always in awe about how every generation takes it to the next level. You know, when I grew up, we didn't have internet. You know, we would have, okay, I'll meet you at 7:00 at the pizza place. I'll get there on my little bike, you know, Schwinn bike. And that was like our way of texting or talking or chatting or, you know, anything like that. You know, I think I was very fortunate, and a lot of us we were that one generation that got to see every different like avenue of technology and communication throughout the years. You know, we were the ones that had beepers. We were the ones that used chat rooms. You know, we've had every type of cell phone you can ever imagine of different variations. You know, it was kind of, I remember using one of the very first Apple computers when I was a kid. And so it was really kind of interesting to see that kind of progression and how the youth consume content or how they interact and things like that. And it's always fascinating. I'm constantly learning from them on a daily basis.
And then what happened for with the next chapter then? So kind of going on to that. So jumping in.
Yeah. So you know, it was definitely a challenging time because I think I was going through a period where I didn't know really what I wanted to do next. And also it was really challenging because here I had this resume of all these crazy jobs. And I think when I applied for different places, people didn't know what, you know, like, okay, you don't really fit in this lane. You don't fit in that lane. You're a little bit of all over the place. You're, you know, I wasn't an expert in specifically one field. I was good at everything kind of a thing. You know, I just had enough knowledge to get by. So it was really kind of challenging to try to figure myself out what I wanted to do, where I needed to fit in. So I took a number of different jobs at places that I just knew. I was like, you know what, my heart's not there. My thing's not there. Eventually I got to work for Live Nation and I was doing partnerships and sales with them. And it was really crazy to see that aspect of the music industry. You know, it's definitely business driven, revenue driven, about, you know, how many bodies they can get into concert venues. Everything is analyzed on data and things like that. Live Nation's, it's this big behemoth. I mean, they own music. You know, there's only very few promoters that control the venues, they control the artists, they control tickets and concerts and things like that. So it was really interesting, a little bit cutthroat, meeting people that work there that really didn't like music or live entertainment. So it was really kind of a challenging thing for me to understand. But it was great because I got to bring in all these different brands and individuals that I had met through maybe action sports or all these different worlds, and bring them back into music and educate them and show them like how it could help promote brands. So a great example was, they were kind of really getting around launching. They would have a big splash on global stage, some of our key people, and then they ended up doing a ship with G and Rock Nation that launched the entire thing. Pac Sun or Pacific Sunwear, the big retail chain at the time, they were trying to launch a music program. So I brought them on board to sponsor the new renovated Palladium, and they sponsored the Jay-Z opening night concert, which is a whole nother story, which was ridiculous. And then they that kind of launched their entire lifestyle music initiative that they did. So it was really cool. And I think the perk of it all was I got to go to concerts every night. I got to see every band. I had all access to all the different venues and got to go around and travel and see that. And it was incredible time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then like, was that when like, was it Red Bull that kind of started that off? Like, was that afterwards, or what happened after Live Nation?
So around that time was really interesting. I had been hit up by a number of times in some country, try to go work for them. And a lot of friends there and things like that. There was an opportunity to go there, but it wasn't the right timing. So I went to go work for Troy Lee Designs to run their global marketing. And that was kind of fun again, because I got to be immersed in motorsports and, running a supercross team and running the partnerships and working with the best mountain bikers in the world. So it was definitely a unique, challenging time. It was funny to launch like social media for those guys. Troy, met Troy Lee, he was like, Facebook's a waste of time. This is a waste and all stuff. Created a social media presence behind his back, created a Facebook page for him. People were coming up to the streets going, Troy, thanks for adding me as a friend. He was like, what the hell are you talking about? Now they have, I think, like 500,000 or 600,000 followers. So, in working at Troy Lee, again, I would kind of got to work with Red Bull because they were one of our main sponsors on Supercross. And at that same time, I launched a thing with a number of other people called Group Y, which we can talk about in a few minutes. And the guys at Red Bull approached me again and said, hey, we have two jobs. We have one to run all of our events, but we think we have a better job for you. And it's to create this whole new initiative doing partnerships, working with outside brands and having them work with us on events, on content, bringing the entire world of Red Bull in. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is an incredible opportunity. And so that's when I came on board to basically launch national partnerships for them. And oh my God, if I had only known. The world of Red Bull is a massive, massive thing. And to understand it, to get a sense of it all, to everything that they do, it's a challenge, but it was incredible because it allowed me to be involved in so many different worlds, to kind of use all the contacts that I had and to really kind of think outside the box on how we can kind of work together hand in hand with others. For so long, Red Bull was always about them. It was always their brand. So any event they did, it was Red Bull, Red Bull, Red Bull. Any of their athletes, head to toe, like Red Bull, Red Bull. So it was the first time where I had to change almost the entire company mindset to like, okay, we now need to allow us to be, our logo needs to sit side by side with like a car company or, any other company. And it was challenging. And it was the same thing, at that time, I would go meet with almost all the top CEOs and CMOs of Fortune 500 brands, movie studios, you name it. I met with them and I was kind of showing them this like clip of like, here's the world of Red Bull. And you would just see all these executives, their jaws would drop, but at the same time, they're like, oh, we don't know what to do. There's like too much. There's, like, holy crap. Like, so it was fun. It was crazy. And again, it was one of those ones where I was on an airplane almost every day. I did 100,000, if not more, miles of flying constantly, not only around the United States, but, in Europe and other places too. So
and you would have built up a lot of contacts. I mean, not just through that, right? But just all the way through the beginning, like the whole, almost like right from the start from MTV. And was that when you thought, okay, I can start my own thing here, and we can kind of build something out of that?
Yeah, definitely. So, definitely I had built up a number of contacts, through all the different roles you said, and they were all in different industries. Again, a lot of people kind of get recycled and move around from company to company, but definitely was interesting. This was all pre-LinkedIn, so you didn't really have it in one place. You all kind of had it written down on like an Excel sheet maybe, or on a piece of paper.
Business cards, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tons of business cards sitting around. I still, it's funny to see those. So it was one of those things where, again, I think around that time, there was myself and 4 others that worked in action sports and entertainment. And we were saying, hey, let's, the only time we ever get to see each other is at trade shows. Maybe at that time it was like the ASR trade show, or, maybe an industry party. But let's try to figure out a way how we can get together in an informal setting and maybe talk and figure out ways how we can help each other out, make introductions to other people. So we did that one night, and we're like, this is really cool. Let's start inviting maybe a couple more of our friends every month. So, each time the group kind of grew bigger and bigger, we'd find a different restaurant or bar to go hang out at. And it got to the point where we're like, okay, we got something here. We need to make it a little bit more legitimate. And so we gave it a name, and it was called Group Y. We really didn't know why we called it Group Y. There's no real meaning behind it. It's not about Gen Y or anything like that. I've heard so many people come up with different ways or why we called it that. We had our very first event where we had a panel discussion about youth culture and youth marketing, and we would have a representative from Surfer Magazine, Verizon, MySpace, which was the big thing at that time, and Quicksilver. And we had about 150 plus people there. And we're like, wow, this is really cool. This is really, it was the networking aspect of it and the education aspect of it. For me personally, I loved it because I was always getting hit up by people saying, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Can you introduce me to so-and-so? And it got exhausting. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, you know what? Just come to the event. You're all going to be in the same room together. I'll just do the quick little intros and you can talk there.
Yeah.
And from there, Group Y started growing little by little by little. And we started holding these monthly events, and it, I can go on, and it gradually grew into something, here we are 15 years later. So.
Yeah, you guys have just had your 15th anniversary, right?
Yeah, we're about to have our 15th of our very first event that we did. Yeah.
Nice. And how have you sort of seen, different things change, or, within the industry over that time? So over those 15 years, have you sort of changed the model depending on sort of what has been happening, or?
Yeah, definitely. So, we were always kind of like a community-based organization, and we were holding these events to kind of bring the community together. And we would talk about all the different kind of relevant topics at the time. So whether it's about, the emergence of e-commerce and selling direct to consumer, to how you can use social media and content, how athletes are and influencers can help your company. So we definitely made it more about how it helps you personally, but also helps you as a brand, and really kind of focused on that aspect. And when we launched this at that time, there was no thing like Clubhouse. There was no little networking organizations that there are now. I mean, it's definitely interesting to see in 15 years, at that time, there was really, social media wasn't really as prevalent. So it's really interesting to see kind of the progression and how things have kind of shifted so quickly in those 15 plus years. We try to stay as relevant as we can. We tried to bring, in that kind of 15 plus years, I brought on people that I wanted to personally hear from, that I knew had incredible stories, that may have never shared it on any other platform, whether it was a brand founder, an actor, a celebrity, an athlete, somebody that was influencing their kind of community. So I would always try to find people that could bring something new to the table. And, I think we're at about 800 plus speakers that we've had throughout the years. Our events have kind of progressively grown. So we went on to then produce our own conferences, which we did. The Action Sports Conference was our first one, we did with the X Games. And then eventually we started doing them with Agenda Trade Show. That led to creating Agenda Emerge, which was kind of like the TED Talk for the youth culture. Again, we would get like Nas speaking, and then you would get Nike's head designer, Tinker Hatfield. You would get founders of Herschel and Stance Socks and the Hundreds. And so we would get this kind of eclectic mix of people talking about on a very high level side of things. And then that eventually would evolve to us producing talks at ComplexCon. And that kind of, about every topic under the sun. And then that eventually we started working with major music festivals. So working with Pharrell's team on Something in the Water Festival, and then with Coachella. So it's incredible to see how this kind of like one night of us kind of getting together, our little drinking group has kind of grown to kind of really create change and really kind of create some new experiences for people.
And what do you think's been the success behind that? I mean, is there, obviously it's multiple factors, but I mean, if there's anything that you've sort of learned over that time, what do you reckon?
I think first and foremost, it's about the experience for the person that's there in the audience. So any event that I always do, I always take that moment to kind of sit in the back row, or sit in the back and watch it all, and just kind of take it in and look at people's expressions, see how people are interacting. I try to create an experience that I would want to enjoy. I don't want to create something that's going to be boring and be like a one and done, and then you'll never think about it again. So, I also like to create those aha moments, like something that's really unique, and something that's, you're going to remember for a long time. I like to create unique pairings. So as I mentioned, I got Nas and P-Rod on stage together. Mind you, those two had done a video together, but they had never met each other. And it was really kind of cool to see that kind of happen. I try to create these unique experiences. We did, there was a movie called Belly that Nas and Run DMX was in, and Hype Williams, who was a famous kind of filmer, and we kind of created a reunion of them on stage and talking about the backstories. We did a panel about the making of Kanye's album, his iconic album, and bringing all the people behind that. It's just creating those things that people are just going to be like, wow, I walked away learning so much. There's memorable sound bites. And just like, wow, my life is better because of it.
And where do you see it going? I mean, with everything that's happened this year, the past year, and what do you think the future of these type of events and gatherings are going to be?
I mean, it was really crazy, to think about it. Like just a year ago around this time, right before this all kind of happened, we had a whole roster of events that we were going to do, and again, working with some of the biggest music festivals, creating this kind of unique, amazing content. And then when COVID happened, everyone of course shifted to virtual events and Zoom, and I've produced way too many virtual events during this time. I see the need for them. Here we are on a virtual one in a sense, but you don't get the real live experience. You don't get that kind of human connection that you do when you are in person. So it's really challenging to kind of replicate that and try to, with technology kind of limitations. Clubhouse has been interesting. I think now the audio only platforms that are kind of emerging, at one time it was a challenge for myself to get some of these personalities and celebrities and company founders to talk. It took time and effort in talking to their publicists or their assistants, or maybe in some cases you had to pay for them. I think with Clubhouse, it eliminated all that and it allowed accessibility. Now it's like a who's who is on that platform talking about any particular topic. I mean, you can find about, if you're in NFTs, boom, you've got that there. If you're into launching your own brand, you can find that there. You want to create your own newsletter, boom. So I definitely think now you're going to have these kind of people that you thought were never accessible now available and sharing their life and sharing their life lessons and things that made them successful. It's going to be really interesting. I think the pairings are going to be really cool. I've always, again, as I mentioned, I really wanted to get someone like an AOC with, the Rage Against the Machine guys and Killer Mike kind of talking together and having an open conversation. And now you see that. I mean, you see those kind of pairings happening all the time now. I think conversation and talk will always be there. It was really interesting to bring that aspect to like say a music festival. I would think that if you went to a big music festival, you want to go see your favorite band at all the stages. But then when you have another component to it where you have people talking on a stage and sharing their viewpoints and ideas, people want to hear that. They gravitate to that. They want to kind of, immerse themselves and again, learn something from it. And so I think there's always going to be a need for that in one capacity or another.
And what's next for you guys for Group Y? What are you going to be working
on? So we've had a lot of ideas. We're definitely going to keep doing the events. We're going to keep growing them. We're going to kind of find new platforms for us to kind of go to, try to figure out new themes and discussions. We've also, thanks to COVID, focused on creating some new platforms that we kind of had the intellectual properties to, and it was kind of like brewing in my head for so many years. So we launched one called Industry Resource that actually came out of working at the trade shows, where we help brands of all sizes connect with service providers and give them the tools and education to help grow their brands. So instead of a company, if you're like a designer or you work in operations or e-commerce, you don't have to search all over the internet to try to find a video or like, oh my God, how do I do this? Who's the right company to work with to help fix this solution or this problem? And we kind of made a one-stop shop for that. The other part was authenticity. This was something that kind of came out of our Action Sports Conference that we did 8 years ago. And it's something that I've kind of lived and breathed. What does authenticity mean to you? And when you ask that question to somebody, you get a wide range of answers. There's not kind of one specific answer to that. So I've been diving deep throughout the years about asking people what authenticity means to them, what makes them authentic, and then what brands they feel are authentic and the reasons why behind it. So we launched a platform called authenticity.co. So if you can go to the website right now, we have a brand ranking on there based upon what people think. So of course, the top 2 brands that people think are authentic is Patagonia and Vans, which is really interesting to see. And we're just compiling all this information. And from there, we're going to kind of release reports. We're going to do events. We're going to have some speakers talk about it. We're going to work with companies to understand why their brand may not be perceived as authentic to their consumer. So it's really something that's a passion project of mine. And it's something that, again, is very subjective. We're going to be creating content series around it, interviewing celebrities and influential people about their thoughts about that. So that's it. We've been doing the Action Sports Conference, which is now called the Action Sports and Culture, ASC. We did that in October, so that was a fun event to do virtually, bringing in all the different characters and personalities and the people that were really behind the scenes on making action sports, whether they are athletes, the competitions side, the brand founders, people. Also, we had people from TikTok and FaZe Clan from the esports and platform side of things. So it was really interesting. And so I think we're going to kind of continue that forward also. So a lot going on for sure.
Loads going on.
Yeah.
No, sorry, go on.
No, we're trying to create an ecosystem where, if you come into Group Y through one of our events, then there's other components of it that will help you individually as a person, but also you as if you have a brand to grow.
And that would be sort of looking into different sort of skill and roles, right? So whether it's marketing or PR or operations, whatever it may be.
Exactly. So, we work a lot with SEMA, which is the surf industry. We work with SDSI. We work with a lot of trade associations and others. We produce talks on an event called Hall of Flowers, which is the cannabis industry, which is really interesting because you see a lot of people crossing over from like the action sports and entertainment industry going into that world. So there's a ton of crossover, and everybody has the same challenges and problems. So we're here to kind of help them with that progression moving forward.
Awesome. And what's the best way for people to either reach out to yourself or to find out more about Group Y and what's going on and what events you're going to be holding?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, which is just Group Y, the letter Y, network.com, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Group Y. Or, we're on LinkedIn also, which is a great place, or you can follow me on LinkedIn or, DM me on there, and I'll definitely answer all the questions for you. And then for
Nice.
the other platforms, we have authenticity.co is the website. And then the other one's industryresource.co.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, Mark, thanks so much. It's been super interesting hearing about everything and like all your stories throughout the years. And we'll definitely be keeping in touch and look forward to seeing what Group Y and what you're up to later on in the year.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and great to be speaking with everyone out there. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.